Furnace is running, and if you'll notice on a sealed crawl space done with new construction, one of the things that they do is they just put this dryer vent on their air conditioning system. If you look under it, while that's running, air coming from the ducting, and the air conditioning system is dumping into the crawl space. You see, the first mistake that happens in almost all new building construction is that there's no dampener to control the airflow. This is just a backflow. When this thing is running, there is a ton of air being blown out of this crawl space right now. It's hard to represent that, but way too much air. Good to put a little collar on these, comes out, that'll have a dampener so you can choke back the amount of air. But also, this is going to be a very large crawl space. All of the air is blowing straight down and right against the wall, which leaves about 1,800 square foot of crawl space out that way with no airflow at all, affecting the temperature but also the humidity of the space. Coming back this way, you can see some more mold staining on the wood. I like to take my fingers and rub it to see if anything comes off, and with this it's coming pretty clean. So it's likely that was just some stains from the original construction. Not an active mold growth situation. As you can see here, as I take this white stuff and smear it, that's generally a newer mold growth. You can see that right there. It's happening because this style of conditioned crawl space using that small air vent doesn't keep the crawl space dry enough in all seasons. It's going to be very dry right now because it's the winter time and the furnace is running. So as long as the furnace is running, it's pumping in here about 25% humidity. Crawl space stays dry, but in the summer and fall, the air conditioning system can't put enough cold, dry air into this crawl space to keep the humidity lower than about 65%, where you'll start having mold grow over time on the wood throughout the space. So we'll continue to look for more evidence of issues with mold. Sorry for the video, but I crawl around and duck and dodge under these things I barely fit under. It's a day in the life of me inspecting homes. I do about 3 or 4 of these a day, 5 days a week. So pretty used to it. See, when they build a new home with a sealed crawl space, there are no foundation vents. So while they're building it, these crawl spaces get very humid before the air conditioning can be running, and they will grow some mold at that time too. And it ends up being these stains you see on the wood. But what we're looking for is mold that when I touch it, will kind of wipe off. That will be newer growth that's happening seasonally. People always say, with a sealed crawl space, you have a sealed liner. As you start really looking at the liner, you see it's not really sealed. You're going to get air from underneath that vapor barrier into this space. And that's one of the real problems with a sealed crawl space like this, is right underneath this vapor barrier is dirt. There's an extra sheet of plastic on this one they left down from the temporary vapor barrier. And there's trapped moisture growing molds and bacteria. So throughout the years that this space is sealed up, enough little bits of mold mold spores, gases start to come back through, that you end up having trapped mold in the air, even if the wood is nice and clean and not growing any mold. There's a little bit of mold that has started to grow a little bit again. And again, if you were to put a humidity sensor in a sealed crawl space like this, you'll find that during the winter things are perfect, but in the summer things are not so perfect. And here's an example of what I'm talking about. All this here is fresh, new mold growth that's now growing on the wood, and will end up being a real issue. I don't know if you can see this kind of yellow mold here. All that stuff right there. That's just from this crawl space not having adequate dehumidification during the summer. And over the years, that will continue to spread till after maybe 20 years, this whole crawl space might have that type of mold growth, or maybe sooner. So that's the basics of the sealed crawl space. A couple of other things to look for when I'm doing these inspections. You kind of see there's lots of bugs in here. Well, the bugs come from these little imperfections in the vapor barrier. They'll allow the bugs and gas and molds, other things that you don't want to be breathing, to make their way up from underneath the vapor barrier. Now, this job was done by Live Green. They are an insulation contractor. I would say they do probably 80% of all new construction in the area here. They're a quality contractor. As you can see, they've done a nice sealed crawl space. But the industry doesn't understand the concept of a sealed crawl space, other than maybe its value as an insulator. You can see here's some more of that active mold here that we're finding. Comes in all different colors. You'll get black, green, yellow, white. But as an insulation contractor, they're just creating an energy efficient sealed crawl space that will pass building code for North Carolina. So they're doing their job perfectly. But the idea that the vapor barrier is never really perfectly sealed, that's one of our urban myths that we like to bust. The idea that underneath this vapor barrier, where there's multiple layers of plastic and dirt and trapped moisture, doesn't affect the air quality or the humidity in here. Those two things combine to make for a very unhealthy space that not only will grow some mold in it, but the air quality from our test show that a sealed crawl space like this, that looks good and clean, with a few little issues with mold, will generally carry 3 times more mold spores in the air than a ventilated crawl space that's had a history of moisture problems, strictly because they've eliminated the idea of any fresh air exchange. And you'll see here, code requires them to put a giant hole in the vapor barrier that lets in more mold, bacteria. You can see the ground is colored with different types of molds and things, gases, and also the bugs. There you go, that's the basics for a builder grade sealed crawl space.